You forged Dad's will, Mom. Everyone's finally going to see what you are. Michael's voice hit me before the folder did. It slammed onto the lawyer's desk beside my hands, papers sliding out like white shards of accusation. The room went still around us. Even the blinds stopped moving, frozen in the late afternoon light as if the truth itself was holding its breath. Rebecca stared at the floor. The lawyer refused to look at me. And near the door stood a woman I had never seen before, watching, waiting, as though she already knew how this would end. In that moment, with my own son calling me a criminal, I realized something none of them were prepared to face. My husband's secrets did not die with him. They were about to destroy the living. If you want the truth, it didn't start in that office. It started 3 months earlier, in my kitchen, with the smell of lilies turning sour and a humming refrigerator that suddenly sounded too loud for a house meant for two. I was standing at the sink, staring out at the bare maple tree in the backyard when I noticed the flowers. White lilies, once elegant, now browning at the edges, sagging over the crystal vase like they were ashamed to still be here. They had arrived after the funeral, brought by people who loved my husband, or at least loved being seen loving him. I should have thrown them out days ago. Instead, like so many things in my marriage, I had let them sit and rot in plain sight. I turned off the tap and listened. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a woman who'd spent 43 years hearing the thud of his steps in the hallway. The murmur of his voice on late-night phone calls he always said were about work. The low whistle he made when he read the financial section. Now there was just the refrigerator and the ticking clock and the ache behind my ribs. I picked up the vase. The water smelled faintly of decay. I carried the flowers to the trash and dropped them in, one by one. Petals stuck to my fingers. When I was done, the vase sat empty on the counter, a ring of green scum circling the bottom. That was my first lesson in widowhood. You don't just lose a person. You inherit what they left unattended. The front door opened without a knock. "Mom?" Rebecca's voice floated down the hall, bright and too cheerful, like someone walking into a hospital room pretending the machines weren't screaming. In the kitchen, I called back. She appeared a moment later, cheeks flushed from the cold, scarf loose around her neck, hair pulled into a rush of a bun. At 38, she still had the soft, pretty face strangers used to compliment when she was a child. People always said she had my eyes. I couldn't see it. Hers darted too much. She kissed my cheek, then immediately noticed the empty space on the table. "You finally got rid of the funeral flowers," she said. "Good. They were depressing. They were dead," I said. "There's a difference." She didn't answer. Instead, she moved around the kitchen, opening cabinets, straightening things that didn't need straightening. Her restlessness made my teacups nervous. "Michael called me," she said without looking at me. "He wants us all to go to the lawyer together next week, to finalize everything. Everything." As if an entire life could be sorted into folders and signatures. I wiped a ring of water from the table with my thumb. "Next week?" He says sooner is better. "For taxes and stuff." She shrugged, eyes fixed on the sugar bowl. "He's worried you're not prepared." "Prepared for what?" I asked. She hesitated. "For all the paperwork. For making decisions. It's a lot. And you're still grieving." I studied her face. The guilt slipped through before she could catch it. A tiny twitch at the corner of her mouth. "Michael thinks I'm old," I said. "He forgets I was managing this house before he could tie his shoes." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He just wants to help." No, I thought. Michael wanted to manage. There was a difference. I had seen it already. The way he walked through the funeral reception like a host instead of a son in mourning. The way he cornered the lawyer in the corner of the living room, speaking in low tones, gesturing with his hand as if he were giving instructions. "Did you talk to the lawyer?" I asked. "A little," she said. "Mostly Michael. You know how he is." "Yes," I said. "I do." She moved to the doorway, glanced down the hall toward my husband's study. The door was half open, the same way I'd left it after the hospice nurse carried out his last armchair. "Have you gone through his things yet?" she asked. "No, you should," she said too quickly. "We can do it together. Get it over with." I followed her gaze. The study looked unchanged in the dim light. Books still lined the shelves in precise rows. His desk sat in its usual spot by the window, the leather chair pushed in neatly. But something in the air felt disturbed, like dust that had been recently unsettled. "I'll do it," I said, "in my own time." Rebecca shifted her weight. "Just don't wait too long. There are important documents, bank stuff, retirement accounts." Michael said. I know what Michael said. I cut in, more sharply than I intended. Her shoulders lifted. For a second she looked like a scolded child. Then she turned away. "I'm just trying to help," she murmured. I softened. "I know." But the truth was, I didn't trust anyone around my husband's things yet. Not Rebecca, with her darting eyes and nervous small talk. Not Michael, with his sudden interest in financial planning. Not the friends who had already begun hinting that I should sell the house, downsize, move into something more manageable. I had been manageable my entire life. Perhaps that was the problem. After Rebecca left, hugging me a little too tightly, reminding me of the lawyer appointment, promising to call later, I stood alone in the hallway, staring at the study door. Grief is a strange creature. Some days it lies quiet at your feet. Other days it pushes you toward places you don't want to go. That afternoon, it nudged me forward. The study smelled like him. Old paper, leather, the faint trace of his aftershave that had clung to his collar. Light fell across the desk in a warm stripe, touching the brass lamp, the framed photo of the kids when they were small, the stack of unopened mail. At first glance, everything was as he had left it. Then I noticed the chair. He had always left it slightly pulled out, angled toward the window where he read in the mornings. Now it was pushed all the way in, perfectly centered. The way I arranged chairs. Not the way he did. Someone had been in here. I moved closer. A pen that used to sit parallel to the blotter lay slightly askew. The bottom drawer on the left side didn't look completely flush with the desk. The details were small, but when you live with someone for 4 decades, you become fluent in the language of their habits. I pulled the drawer open. Folders. Old bank statements. A watch he never wore. Everything neatly stacked. The next drawer held paper, envelopes, a half-finished crossword puzzle with his familiar blocky handwriting filling in the boxes. I rested my fingers on the paper. "What were you hiding, David?" I whispered. Silence. My hand drifted to the top right drawer. Locked. It had always been locked. For years I had respected that boundary. His work, his privacy, his secrets. A good wife doesn't pry, I had told myself. Standing there in the dust-filmed light, widowhood settling on my shoulders like a new, ill-fitting coat, I realized something simple and sharp. Good wives are the easiest people to lie to. I pressed my palm against the drawer, feeling the cool metal of the handle. No key on his ring. No spare in the kitchen. I had checked the day after he died, more out of absent curiosity than any clear intention. Now curiosity had teeth. I closed the drawer and stepped back, heart beating in unfamiliar rhythm. The air in the room felt thicker, heavier, as though the walls were holding in a breath. Later, I would find the key. Later, I would learn what he had hidden. Later, I would stand in that lawyer's office while my son screamed that I had forged a will I had never seen. But in that first week, all I had was a locked drawer, a wrong-angled chair, and a feeling in my chest that something in my life, something I hadn't yet named, was about to break open. I left the study with the door half closed, unable to bring myself to shut it completely. As I walked back down the hall, the phone rang in the kitchen. I answered on the third ring. "Mrs. Hart?" a familiar voice said. "It's Mr. Harrington, the lawyer." "Yes?" "I'd like to schedule a time for you to come in," he said. "There are some things in your husband's file we should discuss before your children get too far ahead of themselves." I frowned. "What kinds of things?" A pause. Papers shuffling on his end. "We'll go over it in person." "It's better that way." I looked down the hall toward the shadowy gap of the study door. The empty house seemed to listen with me. "All right," I said. "I'll come." When I hung up, I realized my hand was trembling slightly. Not from fear. Not yet. From the sense that something had already been set in motion long before I stepped into that office. Long before Michael's shout. Long before the stranger by the door. Long before anyone uttered the word forged. My husband had left me many things when he died. A house, an inheritance, a family with more cracks than I had ever admitted. But the most powerful thing he left behind was unseen. His secrets were still moving in the world, and they were already reaching for me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to the tick of the hallway clock and the soft groan of the house settling around me. Grief makes time behave strangely. Hours stretched, then folded, then collapsed into a single thought. Something in that study was waiting for me. By morning, the winter sun came weak and reluctant through the blinds. I made coffee, though I didn't drink it. I kept glancing toward the study door, drawn to it the way a diver keeps looking at the dark water before a plunge. Finally, around 9, I went in. The room was colder than it had been the day before. A thin layer of dust already clung to the desk, catching the light like powder on skin. I ran my fingers over the locked drawer, then stepped back, scanning everything again with new eyes. A man lives in a room differently than a woman sees a room. I was beginning to understand that. I opened the top left drawer and pulled out the loose papers inside: bank statements, tax forms, letters. I stacked them on the desk in neat piles, though I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Answers don't usually arrive labeled. Then, near the back of the drawer, I saw a small envelope, blank, unsealed. I lifted it carefully. Inside was a photograph. My breath caught before my mind could form a thought. 3 figures stood in the picture. A younger version of my husband, a woman I didn't recognize, and a teenage boy. Dark hair, solemn eyes, standing slightly behind them as though unsure where he belonged. David had been maybe 35 in the photo. The woman next to him had one hand on the boy's shoulder. Her smile was soft, intimate, not posed. David stood close to her. Too close. I touched the edge of the picture lightly. The image felt warm from my fingertips, but something cold bloomed in my stomach. Why didn't I know these people? Why had he kept this hidden? I turned the photo over, nothing written. No date, no names, no answers. I placed it on the desk, face up, and stared at it long enough that the faces started to feel familiar even though they weren't. The clock downstairs chimed. I jumped. I pulled open the second drawer, searching for anything that could explain the photograph. An address. A letter. A note. But the drawer held nothing unusual. Pens, paper clips, a box of envelopes he had never used. Then the third drawer. That one was nearly empty, just a small leather-bound planner and a brass key taped to the inside wall. The key stopped my breath again, but differently this time. It was old-fashioned. Heavy. Brass with a dull sheen, the teeth sharp but worn near the base. Not a house key, not a car key. A key to something that mattered. Why had he taped it inside the drawer? Why hide it at all? I pulled it loose. The tape tugged at a faint layer of dust. He must have put it there months ago, or years. When I held the key in my palm, it felt strangely warm, as if it had been waiting. The weight of it pressed into my skin like a question. "What did you lock away from me, David?" I set the key beside the photograph. They looked wrong together, like mismatched pieces of a puzzle that still somehow formed a truth. Then I heard a noise, a soft one, barely more than a shift of fabric. I froze. Footsteps creaked on the porch. Slow, hesitant. I waited for a knock, but none came. Instead, the shadow of someone passed across the frosted glass window by the door, paused, then moved on. My heart pounded. The logical part of me said it was a delivery person, or a neighbor, or a stray cat brushing against the steps, but something in me whispered otherwise. After a moment, I returned to the desk. I reached for the photograph again, meaning to look closer at the background, some hint of where it had been taken. A bridge? A building? A coastline? But the moment my fingers touched the paper, I felt watched. The memory of the figure outside the window clung to me like cold air. I slid the photograph into my pocket and closed the drawers, leaving only the brass key on the desk. I picked it up, intending to put it somewhere safer, when the phone rang. I answered on the second ring. "Mom?" Rebecca's voice sounded small, worried. I just wanted to check on you." "Why?" The question slipped out sharper than I meant. "I don't know," she said quietly. "You seemed overwhelmed yesterday. And Michael's already planning everything. He said he needs access to Dad's files. He said you weren't handling things." Handling things. A polite way of saying I was too old, too fragile, too lost in grief to function. "Has Michael been in this house?" I asked. "What? No, why would he? Because someone had been." But I didn't tell her that. I didn't mention the moved chair, the shifted pen, the drawer that didn't sit quite right. I didn't say anything about the photograph stuffed in my pocket. Instead, I said, "Tell your brother not to come here unannounced." She hesitated. "Mom, is everything okay?" I looked at the desk. The brass key glinted in the light. "No," I said softly, "but I intend to find out why." When we hung up, I went back to the drawers. I opened them again, searching for anything I had missed the first time. That's when I noticed the faint outline of something once taped to the bottom interior of the top drawer. A rectangular discoloration, the exact shape of a photograph. Someone had removed something before I got here. The edges of my vision tightened. I turned slowly toward the study door. It was still half open. A narrow slice of hallway showed the front of the house, quiet and undisturbed. Had someone been in here last night, while I was sleeping, or even earlier, during the funeral, during the reception when people wandered freely through my home with casseroles and condolences? The question made my skin prickle. I put the key in my pocket beside the photograph and left the study, turning off the light with a trembling hand. I made it halfway down the hall before I remembered the planner I'd left in the third drawer. I hesitated, then decided to leave it, one mystery at a time. The rest of the day passed in a fog. I cleaned things that didn't need cleaning. I organized drawers that had already been sorted. I made tea and let it grow cold. The house felt different now, as if some unseen presence had been activated. A wire pulled tight. A shadow lengthened. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the maple tree, I took the brass key out again. I sat at the kitchen table, running my thumb over its worn surface. It felt like a confession he had never spoken. I tried it on every lock in the house, front door, back door, garage, nothing. I tried furniture, cabinets, drawers, no fit. Finally, I stood in the doorway of the study once more. The locked drawer waited in the dim light. I inserted the key. It didn't turn. My disappointment came with a strange relief. If the key didn't open the drawer, then what did it open? What else had he hidden? A car drove past outside, then slowed, then stopped. Headlights spilled across my living room wall, like gold poured from a cracked jar. My breath caught. I moved toward the window and peeked through the curtain. A dark sedan idled at the curb. I stood completely still, watching, waiting. After a long moment, the engine revved, and the car drove away. My pulse thudded in my ears. Someone was watching this house, watching me. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the rhythm, steady but shaken. Later, when I finally went to bed, I placed the brass key beneath my pillow. It felt absurdly protective, like a charm in a child's fairy tale. But I needed something to hold on to before the truth came knocking, because deep down I already knew my life didn't fall apart the day my husband died. It had been unraveling long before. I had simply never held the thread. Until now. I woke before dawn with the unnerving sense that someone had spoken my name in the dark. For a few seconds I lay absolutely still, listening to the house breathe around me. The quiet was too complete, too deliberate. As though someone had been there only moments before and slipped away when I stirred. I wrapped a sweater around my shoulders and made my way down the hall. The floorboards creaked in places they never creaked for me. Grief changes homes in strange ways, but this felt like something else entirely. Something aware. I pushed open the study door. The air smelled faintly of cold earth, as though whoever had entered last carried winter on their clothes. My husband's desk sat in the same pool of gray morning light as yesterday, but the energy of the room was different. Awake, watching. I crossed to the drawer and retrieved the small leather planner. And that's when I saw it. A faint smudge on the desk. Not dust, not dirt. A fingerprint. Long, narrow. Not mine. My stomach tightened. I opened the planner again, flipping slowly through the pages until I found the entries that had unsettled me last night. February 19th. 3 p.m. Pierce. March 3rd. 2 p.m. LPI. Trace the letters with my thumb. LP Lily Pierce. The woman from the lawyer's office. The one who watched me as if the truth belonged to her. The one who didn't speak, but didn't have to. My husband had been meeting with her for months. In secret. I closed the planner. The doorbell rang loud and sudden, slicing the silence so sharply that my breath caught in my throat. I hurried down the hall and opened the door. Rebecca stood there, pale, hair unbrushed, eyes wide. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited, pushing the door shut behind her with trembling fingers. "Mom," she whispered, "Michael's losing it." I studied her face. Something in her expression had cracked. Not fragile, but frightened. "What happened?" She ran a shaking hand through her hair. "He was up all night, calling people, leaving the house, coming back, yelling. He said you're working against him." "Against him?" I repeated. "Why would he think that?" She swallowed hard. "Because he thinks Dad told you something before he died." I felt the weight of the brass key in my pocket, cold against my thigh. "What kind of something?" She looked toward the study door, then back at me. "Mom, he said you were going to ruin everything if you didn't act fast." "Act fast." The words thudded through me like a dropped stone. I opened my mouth to ask more, but a car door slammed outside. Rebecca flinched. We moved to the window together. Michael's SUV was in the driveway. He climbed out with the stiff, aggressive walk he used to adopt before arguing with his father. Shoulders squared, jaw locked, a storm looking for somewhere to land. "Stay behind me," I murmured. I opened the door before he could knock. He didn't greet me. He didn't even look at Rebecca. He brushed past both of us, charging straight into the hallway like he owned the house he hadn't visited in weeks. "What are you hiding?" he demanded, turning on me. "What did Dad leave in here?" He shoved open the study door so hard it hit the wall. Rebecca stepped forward. "Michael, please." "Don't," he snapped. "You don't get to talk right now." She recoiled as though struck. I moved instinctively between them. "Lower your voice," I said quietly. "I'm not lowering anything." Spit flew with the words. "You've been going through Dad's things. You're meeting with the lawyer behind our backs. You're blocking my calls. What are you doing?" "I'm grieving," I said. "Something you seem to have forgotten how to do." His face twisted. "Don't manipulate me, Mom." I stared at him. Really stared. And saw something I hadn't seen before. Not anger. Not entitlement. Fear. Deep, gnawing fear. I stepped closer. "Michael, what are you involved in?" His eyes flashed. "Don't pretend you don't know. Dad told you everything at the end, didn't he? Before he died, he told you about—" He cut himself off. Rebecca's breath hitched. "About what, Michael?" He pointed at her, shaking. "You shut up. You've said enough." She flinched again, but this time something inside her hardened. "You're losing control," she whispered, just like he did. Michael's expression shifted, a flicker of something close to panic, before he masked it again with rage. Then he spotted the planner on the desk. "What's that?" I reached it before he did. "Nothing you need." He grabbed for it. "Give it to me." Rebecca darted between us. "She said no!" Michael shoved her aside. Not hard, but not gently either. I moved faster than I expected. I caught his wrist mid-reach, fingers firm, unshaking. He stopped. We locked eyes. And for the first time in his life, I didn't look away. "You will not raise your hand in this house," I said softly. The softness made him step back. Rebecca's voice trembled. "Mom, the drawer." I turned toward it, the one that had held the planner. It was open, not wide, not obvious, just enough to show someone had disturbed it again, but this time the air inside it smelled faintly of cold perfume. "Not mine." Rebecca whispered, "Mom, you closed that." "Yes," I said. "And locked it," she added, voice rising. "Yes." Michael looked between us. "What are you talking about? No one was in here but you two." But he said it too quickly, too defensively. I stepped toward him. "Michael, did you come here last night?" His jaw flexed. "No," but his eyes slid to the side. "Toward the window." Rebecca gasped. "Michael, were you here? Were you the one who—" "Shut up," he shouted. "I wasn't here." He was lying. I didn't know why yet, but I knew it the way I knew winter meant early dusk. I walked quietly to the drawer, ignoring both of them. I slid my fingers along the inside edge. The planner was missing again. Someone had taken it, while Rebecca and I were talking. While Michael was storming in. While all our eyes were on each other instead of the truth. Michael threw up his hands. "There's nothing in there. It's empty." "No." It was full. Full of the wrongness of the moment. The shift in the air. The absence of something important. The feeling of being watched even as we stood together. Rebecca whispered, "This isn't Michael. Someone else was here." Michael spun on her. "Stop lying." I faced him calmly. "What are you so afraid we'll find?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Something inside him had cracked enough for the truth to leak through. Just a glimpse, but enough for me to see it clearly. My son was not trying to protect me. He was trying to protect himself. As the tension held all three of us in its grip, I felt a slow, unmistakable shift inside me. A quiet, steady resolve. The kind of resolve that comes when a woman finally realizes she has been underestimated for too long. I am going to find out what your father hid, I said. Michael's nostrils flared. If you dig too deep, you'll regret it. Maybe, I said, but not as much as you already do. Rebecca sucked in a breath. Michael froze, and for a moment, the house fell so silent I could hear his pulse in the air. Then, somewhere outside, a car engine started. Not his, not hers, not mine. Someone else had been waiting, listening, watching. And they were leaving now, just as the truth began to crack open. By the time I reached the front window, the car was already at the end of the street. Just a glimpse of dark paint and a flash of taillights before it turned the corner and vanished, leaving the road empty and the air vibrating with the sound of an engine that had already gone. Someone had been out there, listening, watching, waiting for something. Behind me, my children were still in the study, bristling with anger and fear and half-spoken accusations. But the sound of that car pulling away settled something inside me. I could not afford to wait for the truth to come to me. I had to go after it. That afternoon, when the house was finally quiet again, I called Mr. Harrington's office. His secretary answered with her soft, professional voice. "Hart and Associates. How may I help you?" "This is Evelyn Hart," I said. "I would like to speak with Mr. Harrington. Today." There was a pause. The clicking of keys. "He has you scheduled for next week, Mrs. Hart." "Move it up," I said. "Please." Another pause. I could hear murmuring in the background. A distant, muffled male voice. Then the scrape of a chair. "One moment," she said. I waited, staring at the study door from across the hall. The brass key in my pocket felt heavier with each passing second. When she came back, her tone had changed slightly. "He can see you at 4:30. Does that work?" "Yes," I said. "It does." I hung up and looked around my quiet house. Shadows lengthened across the floor, stretching from the front windows toward the back, like fingers reaching for something they could not yet touch. I slipped the brass key into my purse. I left the photograph hidden where I knew they would not find it. I locked the front door behind me, and I went to hear what my husband had kept from me. Mr. Harrington's office was on the third floor of a low brick building downtown, the kind of place where small law firms and accountants huddled together in faded carpet and old coffee smells. The elevator creaked as it climbed. When the doors slid open, I stepped into a hallway lined with frosted glass doors and hushed conversations. As I walked toward his office, I noticed someone sitting alone at the far end of the corridor. A woman, legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap, dark hair pulled back, coat draped over the chair beside her. She lifted her head when she heard my steps. Our eyes met. It was her, the woman from the lawyer's office, the one who had watched my humiliation without saying a word. She did not smile this time. She just looked at me, calm, assessing, like someone checking the time on a clock she had set herself. Then she lowered her gaze to her phone, as if I were no more interesting than a passing cloud. My hand tightened on my purse strap. I kept walking. The plaque on the door read, "Harrington and Lowell, Attorneys at Law." I opened it without knocking. The receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. "Mrs. Hart," she said. "Go right in. He's expecting you." The familiarity of the office almost made me dizzy. Same brown carpet, same framed degrees, same glass bowl of stale candies on the side table. It felt like nothing in here had ever changed, not even the air. But everything had. Mr. Harrington stood when I entered. His hair was thinner than I remembered from years ago. His tie was slightly crooked, as though he had been pulling at it. "Evelyn," he said. "Thank you for coming early." "Thank you for moving the appointment," I replied. We sat across from each other at his wide, polished desk. That wood had seen countless families settle matters of trust and division. Life and death translated into signatures and clauses. He folded his hands. "How are you holding up?" "I imagine I am doing about as well as you would if your son accused you of being a criminal," I said. He winced. "I heard the intensity of that meeting was unfortunate." "Unfortunate is a word for traffic," I said. "This is something else." He sighed and reached for a folder on his desk. A different one from the one Michael had slammed down days ago. "Thinner. Older. Evelyn," he said carefully. "Your husband came to see me several times in the last year of his life. Some of those visits he kept private from you." I did not flinch. "I know." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "You do?" I thought of the planner, the initials, the careful entries. Pierce. L.P. "I know he had secrets," I said. "That is not the same as knowing what they were." He opened the folder and slid a document toward me. "Not too far. Just enough that I would have to reach if I wanted to see it." "This is what we need to talk about," he said. The heading at the top of the page was simple, typed, undeniable. "Last Will and Testament of David Hart. Draft Amendment." My breath stayed even. I picked up the page with steady hands. The first part was the same as the will I knew. The same acknowledgement, the same declaration of sound mind, an outline of assets, a statement of marital status. But then I reached the changes. The executor had been altered. Not Michael. Not even Rebecca. A neutral trustee. Someone from the firm. A man I had never met. Appointed to stand between my children and everything their father had built. My chest tightened. Farther down, the division of the estate had changed too. No longer an even split, with Michael granted more control over the house and investments. Instead, there were conditions, protections, clauses that would have allowed me to sell or keep the house without pressure. Language meant to make sure I was not outnumbered in my own life. And near the bottom, a line that made my fingers go cold. "A special provision shall be held in a separate memorandum relating to obligations owed to the Pierce household." I looked up slowly. "Obligations," I repeated. Mr. Harrington rubbed his temple. "Your husband was remorseful toward the end. He indicated there was a financial arrangement with an old business partner, Mr. Daniel Pierce. He wanted to formalize it, but he never signed the final version." "Why not?" "He fell ill." Harrington's gaze dropped. "And he hesitated. He said he was worried about upsetting the children." I thought of Michael's rage. Rebecca's fear. The planner gone missing. The watcher in the hallway. Upsetting the children, I thought, was a polite way of saying he feared what the truth would do to the people who depended on his lies. "And this draft?" I asked. "How did my son know to accuse me of forging it?" His shoulders stiffened. "Michael is very motivated. That is one word for him." Harrington hesitated. His fingers tapped once, twice, against the desktop, the pen between them trembling slightly. "Someone else came here before you did," I said quietly. "Your secretary hinted as much. Who was it?" "I am bound by—" "Do not say confidentiality." I cut in. "If they were truly acting in good faith, they would not be asking you to destroy things behind my back." He swallowed. His glasses slipped down his nose. He pushed them back up with a hand that was not quite steady. "She asked me," he said finally, "if there was any way to make sure this draft never surfaced. She said it would only cause trouble for you." "She," I repeated. "So it was a woman." He closed his eyes briefly. "Evelyn." "Dark hair," I continued. "Around 40. Quiet. Watches more than she speaks." His eyes opened sharply. "You saw her," he said. "In the hallway," I replied. "And in this room, the day my son shouted that I forged something I did not know existed." He let out a slow breath. "Her name is Lily. Lily Pierce. She says she is the daughter of your husband's former partner." The words landed like stones dropped in water. Lily Pierce. LP. The initials in his planner. The secret meetings. The line in the draft about obligations owed to the Pierce household. "Why would she want this draft destroyed?" I asked. "She said your husband made promises he could not keep," Harrington said. "She said reviving them would only drag everyone through unnecessary pain, or expose something she would prefer hidden," I murmured. He did not argue. I looked down at the draft again. My husband's name typed at the bottom. A blank line where his signature should have been. "So this is not legal," I said. "Not yet. Without the signature, it is only intent," he replied. "But intent matters, especially if there are supporting documents elsewhere. Email records, bank instructions, audio notes, supporting documents." The phrase clung to me. "Did he leave you anything else?" I asked. "Letters? Instructions?" "A sealed envelope," he said. "Addressed to you. I was to give it to you only after we discussed this draft." He opened the drawer to his right and took out a plain envelope. My name written across it in my husband's hand. That familiar slant. That familiar pressure. He slid it across the desk, just as he had done with the draft. This time, I did not hesitate. I picked it up. It felt heavier than paper ought to feel. "I have not read it," Harrington said. "I have only kept it." I nodded. One corner of the envelope felt thicker than the rest. Not flat. Raised. Like it held something more than a letter. A small, metallic shape pressed against the inside. A key. No, not a key. The shape was wrong. A tag, perhaps. A small metal disc. "There is one more thing," Harrington said. He mentioned a safety deposit box at the bank on Maple Avenue. He said if anything happened before he signed, you would know what to do. My hand went to my purse, to the weight I had carried with me from the house to the car to this office. A brass key. Old. Heavy. Meaningful. I met his gaze. "I think I do know." He leaned back. "Evelyn, whatever your husband was involved in, it is complicated. If you pursue it, it may put you at odds with your children, with other people. People who feel they are owed something." I thought of Michael's threat, Rebecca's tremble, the woman in the hall who had tried to erase my husband's change of heart before I even knew it existed. "They already feel owed," I said. "The difference now is that I finally understand the cost." I slipped the envelope into my purse beside the key. Two small objects. One life, turning. When I left his office, the hallway outside was empty. No dark-haired woman, no watchful eyes. I rode the creaking elevator down alone. The doors opened to cool air and a sky the color of old stone. As I stepped outside, I glanced across the street. A sedan sat at the curb, engine idling. Through the windshield, I saw her. Lily, hands on the steering wheel, eyes on me. We looked at each other across the thin divide of glass and air and all the things my husband had never said. She did not wave, she did not smile, she simply watched. Then, slowly, she pulled away from the curb and drove off, leaving the space in front of the building empty. I stood on the sidewalk with a brass key in my purse and my husband's unwritten confession pressed against my palm. He had tried to change his legacy. He had failed. Now the question was simple and enormous. Would I let his unfinished truth die with him, or would I be the one to sign my name under whatever came next? The sky had darkened by the time I reached my car. Clouds collected thickly over downtown, gathering in heavy folds like something preparing to fall. The wind had turned cold, too, sharp enough to lift the hair at the back of my neck. Lily was gone, but the imprint of her eyes on me remained like a fingerprint pressed into the air. I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I sat there with the brass key in my hand, the metal warming slowly against my skin. I traced its grooves, its edges, the slight nick near the base, a life marked by use, by purpose, a safety deposit box. My husband had left it for me, but he had not left it willingly. Secrets rarely offer themselves freely. They wait to be claimed. I slipped the key back into my purse and drove toward Maple Avenue. The bank was nearly empty when I arrived. A bored-looking teller glanced up from her screen and offered me a polite but distant smile. "May I help you?" "Yes," I said. "I need access to a safety deposit box under the name David Hart." She typed quickly, the soft clack of keys echoing in the quiet lobby. Then she frowned at her monitor. "I see 2 listed," she said. "1 active. 1 marked for private access only." Private access. My husband's way of saying there were things I was never meant to see unless circumstances forced his hand. "I'll need both," I said. She hesitated. "Mrs. Hart, the restricted box requires secondary verification." I placed the brass key on the counter. The moment her eyes landed on it, something in her posture changed. A small straightening of the spine, a slight widening of the eyes, an unspoken recognition that I wasn't a woman wandering off course. She swallowed. "1 moment, please." A few signatures later, a few locked doors, and a metal elevator ride downward, she led me to the vault. The room was colder than the rest of the bank, colder even than the morning air outside. Rows of metal drawers lined the walls, each identical except for the engraved numbers and the small locks that guarded them. She stopped in front of one. "Box 312. "This one first," she said. "It's the flagged account." The metal box was clean, unmarked, except for a faint smudge near the lock. I wondered if that smudge matched the fingerprint I had seen in the study. My heart thudded once, deep and loud. I inserted the key and turned it gently. It slid open smoothly, no resistance, no hesitation, as though it had been waiting for this moment. Inside was a single manila envelope. Nothing else. The teller stepped back politely, hands behind her. "You may use the privacy room if you'd like." "No," I said. "I'll open it here." She nodded and retreated to a respectful distance, far enough not to hear, close enough to intervene if I collapsed. Widowhood teaches people to be cautious around you, as though you might break without warning. I lifted the envelope. It was thicker than the one from Harrington's office. Heavier. The weight of memory. Or confession. My husband's name was written across the front. David Hart. But the handwriting below it, mine, was another script entirely. For Evelyn. Only Evelyn. A chill wrapped around my spine. I opened it. Inside were 3 things. A handwritten letter, a small silver USB drive, and a folded document with a faint watermark on the corner. I set the USB drive aside and unfolded the letter first. My husband's handwriting, familiar in its uneven slant, inconsistent in its pressure, stared back at me. "My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then I failed to do what I should have done long before illness made me a coward." My breath tightened at that word. Coward. Spoken not as confession, but as judgment. I read on. "There are matters I hid from you. Not because I wanted to deceive you, but because I did not know how to undo the choices I made when I was a younger man. Choices that grew sharper with time, not softer. The Pierces. You have heard the name by now. I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering myself. Lily's calm stare in the hallway. Michael's fear. Rebecca's tremble. Everything revolved around the name I had never spoken aloud until this week. I continued. Daniel and I began a venture together before you and I married. It failed, and I took responsibility on paper to protect him. I believed he would do the same for me if the world turned badly. I was wrong. For years I paid debts that were not mine, sent money I could not spare, and kept promises that should never have been made. Worse than the money was the lie that followed it. The lie has a name. Lily. My pulse hammered in my throat. When her mother died, Daniel told her I was her father. I was not. But I had loved her mother once, long before you and I found each other. And because I loved her mother, because I failed her, I agreed to help raise the girl from a distance. I did not tell you. For that I will carry regret into whatever comes next. I kept reading, my breath shallow. As the years passed, the obligations grew heavier. I covered Daniel's mistakes, his thefts, his debts, hoping each time it would be the last. It never was. Lily became the one he threatened to hurt with poverty, or worse, if I did not comply. I believed he was capable of harming her, Evelyn. I still do. When I became ill, I tried to put things in order. The revised will was meant to protect you from Michael's temper and from the Pierces' demands. But I did not sign it. Fear held my hand still. Fear of what would happen if the truth came in the wrong order. I am asking you now, do not let them take what is yours. Do not let the past decide your future. And forgive me if you can. Yours, David. My hands trembled slightly as I refolded the letter. Compassion and anger braided inside me, indistinguishable. He had trusted me with a burden he had refused to share while alive. I reached for the folded document next. It was a photocopy, faint, creased. The heading at the top read, Delayed Transfer Agreement, Pierce Partnership. Below it, amounts, dates, signatures. One signature was my husband's. The other, my breath caught, Daniel Pierce. The numbers were staggering. This wasn't a small debt. This was a lifetime of financial servitude. No wonder my husband had kept silent. Pride and shame walk hand in hand. I set the paper aside and finally picked up the small USB drive. It felt too light to hold anything meaningful, yet I knew it did. My husband had recorded something. His voice, his explanations, maybe his fear, or maybe proof that would burn everything down. I slipped the drive into my purse. I'm done, I said softly. The teller stepped forward and retrieved the empty box. As she escorted me back into the hallway, I asked, Miss, has anyone accessed this box recently? Before today? Her brow furrowed. No, ma'am. Only your husband and now you. Are you certain? I pressed. Yes, she said without hesitation. He last came about a month before he passed. No one since. But someone had known I would come. Someone had watched my house. Someone waited in that hallway outside Harrington's office. And someone had been brave enough, or desperate enough, to break into my home for the planner. The same planner that had now found its missing companion. This envelope. I walked out of the vault and through the lobby, each step heavier than the last. As I reached the glass doors, the reflection of the street outside shimmered faintly. A dark sedan sat across the parking lot. Engine running, windows tinted, watching. I stepped forward until the automatic doors slid open. The sedan pulled away slowly, turning right, not hurrying, not hiding, just leaving me with the message it carried. We see you. We know you're looking. We are waiting for your next move. I closed my fingers around the brass key. For the first time since my husband died, the grief inside me steadied. Not gone, not healed, just focused. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the truth, not of the Pierce family, not of what my children would say or do. Because the moment I opened that envelope in the vault, I understood something simple and sharp. The people who had lied to me were scared. And I, armed with a key, a letter, and my husband's final trembling honesty, was finally becoming someone they should fear in return. I didn't go straight home. Not after the messages. Not with the cold weight of the USB drive burning through the lining of my coat pocket. Instead, I pulled over beneath the bare branches of an old maple tree 2 blocks from my house. The late afternoon light was thinning, stretching shadows long across the windshield. I shut off the engine, but I didn't open the door. My hand stayed wrapped around the steering wheel, gripping it like something alive might try to take it from me. The unknown sender's threats lingered on my phone screen. "Stop digging. You should have left it alone. Your husband knew the cost." And then the image. A blurry shot of me in the bank lobby, envelope in hand, my posture small beneath the fluorescent lights. Someone had been close enough to photograph me, close enough to know exactly what time I opened the box, close enough to send that picture minutes after. I wasn't paranoid. I was observed. I pressed my fingertips against the USB drive in my pocket. My husband's voice was inside it. Not the man he pretended to be in front of our children. Not the confident provider he presented to the world. This would be the man behind a locked drawer, behind the planner pages filled with initials, behind secrets that had grown roots too deep to pull cleanly from the soil. I plugged the drive into the USB port on the dashboard. For a moment, nothing. Then a click, followed by a soft, uneven breath. Evelyn. Just my name. But in that one word, I heard every apology he never spoke aloud. "If you're hearing this," he said, "then I didn't fix things in time. I closed my eyes." His voice was thinner than I remembered, roughened by illness. But it was undeniably him, my husband of 43 years, a man I had loved even in the years when he'd become a stranger to me. "I know you've wondered," he continued, "why I met with Harrington, why I changed the will, why I kept certain things from you. Certain things." A small, gentle phrase for betrayals, heavy enough to bend a life out of shape. "I didn't tell you about Pierce," he went on, "because I didn't know how to explain the past without hurting you. Daniel wasn't just a business partner. He was a complication." His breath stuttered. He coughed. Short, painful. I thought I owed him, for things that happened long before you and I met. I told myself protecting him was loyalty, but it wasn't. It was fear. Fear disguised as debt. He paused as though gathering strength. "And Evelyn, Lily." My grip tightened around the steering wheel. "She isn't my daughter. Not biologically. But Daniel insisted she might be, and when her mother died, he used that lie to control me. I helped raise her from a distance, because I loved her mother once, years ago. Too many years ago to matter now." His voice softened. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I see now I was just avoiding the truth." A shiver crawled down my spine. Avoiding the truth. That was what secrets always were. Not protection. Neglect. "Lily believes I abandoned her," he whispered. "She believes I owe her something." Daniel encouraged that belief to keep me compliant. Compliance. Servitude. Fear. Words that didn't belong to the man I married, but to the man he must have become when no one was looking. "I kept paying," he said. "I kept giving." They threatened to come forward with their version of the story if I didn't. Blackmail. Of course. And then the children. He exhaled, long and weary. "Michael took money. More than he ever admitted. He forged my name once. I let him repay me quietly so Rebecca wouldn't find out. But she had found out. I had seen it in her eyes. And when I grew sick, he panicked. They both panicked. Michael feared losing control of the estate. Rebecca feared losing him. They're not bad children, Evelyn. They're just children who made terrible choices and didn't know how to stop. A quiet rustle. Paper shifting. I changed the will to protect you from them. Not to punish them, never that, but to give you the freedom they might try to take from you out of desperation. My throat tightened. I didn't sign it because I was afraid. Afraid they would turn against you if they knew how much debt and danger I had hidden. His voice cracked on the next breath. I'm sorry, Evelyn. For everything I buried. For everything you're now forced to uncover alone. The speaker clicked softly. The recording ended. Just like that. No goodbye. I leaned back in my seat, letting the silence settle over me. For a long moment, I didn't move. Couldn't move. My husband's sins weren't small. They weren't even singular. They were layered. Fear on guilt on regret. Stacked so high they had finally collapsed under their own weight. And now the rubble lay at my feet. I pulled the USB drive free and held it in my palm. It felt warmer than before, as though his voice had lingered in it, trying to reach me through the months of silence. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. You don't understand what you're involved in. Go home. I exhaled slowly. Not with fear. With resolve. I typed back only 2 words. I won't. I didn't send it. Not yet. But writing it felt like an answer I had needed to hear from myself. I slipped the drive into my coat pocket beside the brass key and finally turned the engine back on. The maple tree's branches scraped gently against the roof as I pulled away, like long fingers bidding me either warning or encouragement. Hard to know which. But one thing was clear. My husband's unfinished truth was no longer about him. It was about the people still alive who wanted it buried. People who were watching me. People who believed fear would keep me quiet. They didn't know me at all. I drove toward home with the certainty of someone who had stopped being afraid of finding the truth and started being afraid of what would happen if I didn't. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun had slipped below the houses, leaving the sky the color of bruised lavender. My porch light flickered on automatically, casting a weak halo across the steps. Everything looked quiet. Normal. Normal had become a costume my life wore poorly. I locked the car and walked toward the house, the brass key and USB drive clinking softly in my coat pocket. I was reaching for my front door when I heard it. A car engine a few streets over. Then headlights sweeping fast. Too fast. I turned. A silver hatchback rounded the corner and screeched to a stop in front of my house. The driver's door flew open. Rebecca stumbled out. Her hair was wild, her coat thrown over pajamas, and her face blotched with tears. She ran toward me, arms out as if bracing for impact. "Mom! Mom, please!" Before I could speak, she collapsed against me, shaking so hard I felt it through my ribs. "Rebecca," I whispered, holding her shoulders. "What's happened?" She clung to me like a drowning person. I didn't know where else to go. The wind bit at us, cold and sharp. I guided her inside, closed the door, and locked it with a click that felt more necessary tonight than ever before. She sank onto the living room sofa, curling into herself like she wanted to disappear. I sat beside her, letting the quiet stretch until she found her breath. Finally, she choked out, "It's Michael." My stomach tightened. "What about him? He's angry? He thinks you're taking everything. He says the will is fake. He says you're going to ruin us. And tonight," her voice cracked, "tonight he said if I don't help him get what he deserves, he'll make sure I lose everything too." The words hit me like cold water. "He threatened you?" I asked. She nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "He's not himself, Mom. He's unraveling. And it's my fault. I should have told you. I should have said something sooner. Said what? Her eyes finally lifted to mine. I knew about Dad's money. About what Michael took. Her voice trembled. I knew for years. My breath stilled. I tried to stop him, she said. I begged him to come clean. But he said, if I ever told you, he'd drag us all down with him. He said Dad couldn't survive another scandal, especially after what happened with Pierce. Her voice shrank to a whisper. I thought I was protecting the family. You were protecting Michael, I said quietly. She flinched but didn't deny it. I thought he'd fix it, she whispered. I thought he'd make it right before Dad saw the truth, but instead he forged paperwork and hid debts and swore he'd replace the money before anyone noticed. I let the words settle. Heavy. True. And when Dad got sick, she added, Michael panicked. He tried to get the lawyer to change the will before Dad could. He was afraid Dad would expose him. Pieces clicked together. Slow. Inevitable. Your brother wasn't trying to protect your father, I said softly. He was trying to protect himself. She let out a broken sob and buried her face in her hands. I rubbed her back gently. Rebecca, look at me. It took her a long moment, but she finally lifted her head. You are not responsible for his choices, I said. You were frightened. You were manipulated. But you are here now. Her lower lip trembled. Mom, there's more. My pulse stilled. Tell me. She swallowed, the movement thick and painful. Michael called someone tonight. I don't know who. He kept whispering about needing to move quickly and that you have something he needs. And then he said, she squeezed her eyes shut. He said he wasn't letting you ruin his life. A coldness spread through me. What did he mean by, you have something? I don't know, she whispered, but he sounded terrified, desperate. And Mom, he wasn't alone. The wind outside rattled the kitchen window, the house listening. Someone was with him, she said. A woman. I heard her voice in the background. My pulse quickened. Describe her. I didn't hear much. Rebecca wiped tears from her cheek. But she sounded calm. Too calm. Like she knew exactly what she was doing. A chill slid down my back. Mom, she whispered. I think it was that woman from the lawyer's office. Lily. Always watching. Always waiting. Always exactly where she needed to be. Rebecca shivered violently. I went to fetch a blanket from the hall closet. When I returned, she sat rigid, eyes fixed on the front window. What is it? I asked. She pointed with a trembling hand. There. I moved beside her. Outside, across the street, a car sat parked beneath the street lamp. Not close enough to threaten, not far enough to ignore. Headlights off, engine running, watching. My heart didn't race this time. It steadied. Mom, Rebecca whispered, is that Michael? No, I said. Your brother doesn't hide. Then who? I know who. I walked to the window and drew the curtains shut. Behind the fabric, the watching continued, the hum of that engine filling the quiet. Rebecca clutched the blanket. What are we going to do? I turned to her, the weight of the USB drive warm against my coat, the brass key cool against my palm. We're going to learn the truth, I said softly. All of it. And Michael? We'll deal with him too, I said. But not yet. Rebecca looked at me as though she were seeing me for the first time. Mom, you're not afraid anymore. No, I said, not anymore. Outside, the unseen watcher idled in the dark. Inside, my daughter cried softly but held herself upright. The truth was no longer something happening to me. It was something I was walking toward. And I wasn't walking alone. Rebecca fell asleep on my sofa sometime after midnight, exhaustion finally dragging her under. I covered her with another blanket and turned off the lamp. leaving only the faint glow of the porch light filtering through the curtains. The car across the street was gone, but I didn't believe that meant anything had improved. People like the Pierces didn't disappear. They repositioned. I checked the locks twice before finally heading to the kitchen. My husband's letter and the photocopied agreement were spread out on the table, the USB drive beside them like a silent witness. I was pouring myself a glass of water when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. This time, there was no text, only a voicemail. My thumb hovered over the screen before I pressed play. A man's voice came through, smooth, calm, with the confidence of someone who had spent his life persuading others. "Mrs. Hart, my name is Daniel Pierce." I stopped breathing. "I imagine you've heard quite a bit about me." He continued. "Some true, some exaggerated, some spoken by a man who, well, let's say illness makes memories slippery." A faint, polite chuckle, insidious in its softness. "Let's not drag this out," he said. "Your husband owed me a considerable amount of money. He also made promises about my daughter's future. Now that he's gone, those responsibilities naturally fall to you." He paused, as if giving me space to absorb the weight of his claim. "I'd prefer we resolve this quietly. I'm sure you understand. I'll be in touch tomorrow with details." Then the line clicked off. A breath of static. Silence again. I stared at the phone, feeling the voice settle in the room like smoke. Not a threat. Not yet. But a promise of one. I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay on the edge of the bed listening for every sound, trying to decide if courage felt more like conviction or simply the refusal to collapse. By morning, the world outside had softened into gray mist. Rebecca was still asleep, curled small and quiet. I wrote her a note so she wouldn't wake to an empty house. Went to run an errand. Lock the door. Call me if Michael shows up. I didn't mention Pierce. Not yet. I didn't want her spinning in that fear alone. I arrived at the cafe Harrington had once taken us to for end-of-year meetings. Neutral ground, quiet, full of retirees reading newspapers and young mothers trying to drink coffee before their children spilled it. Daniel Pierce was already there. I recognized him instantly, even without a picture. Some people carry their reputations in the set of their shoulders, in the ease of their posture. He sat in a corner booth, immaculate in a charcoal coat, hair silvering at the temples. A cup of tea rested in front of him, untouched. His eyes lifted the moment I walked in. Calm, clinical. The eyes of a man who didn't mind watching people suffer if it served his purposes. I approached slowly and slid into the seat across from him. "Mrs. Hart," he said warmly, as if greeting an old friend. "I appreciate your punctuality. You left me little choice." His smile grew. "Direct. Good. That will make this easier." A waitress passed by. Daniel waved her off with a small flick of his wrist, the gesture too imperious for a public place. "I suppose," he said, folding his hands, "you've already been told some version of our history." "My husband told me enough." "Did he?" Daniel leaned forward. "Or did he tell you the parts that made him look like a martyr?" My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice level. "He told me you convinced Lily he might be her father." Daniel's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Lily needed someone. David was the best option available." "She needed the truth," I said. He shrugged lightly. "Truth is overrated. Stability is not." "And the money? The debts?" "Debt," he corrected. "One debt. David and I had an arrangement decades ago. He agreed to uphold his side. I upheld mine." His eyes sharpened. "Until he didn't. Because you used Lily to control him." "You're looking at this emotionally," he said. "It's understandable. But the facts remain. David owed me, and now you owe me. I owe you nothing." He let the words hang in the air between us, his expression softening as though he pitied me. "You're a clever woman, Evelyn. But you're playing a game you don't understand." He reached into his coat and set a folded paper on the table. "This is the outstanding balance, adjusted for inflation and interest. I didn't touch it." He tapped a finger on the paper. "Your husband hid this from you. For good reason." "My husband hid many things," I said quietly. "Not all of them were wise." Daniel's eyes glinted with amusement. "At least you're honest." "But honesty won't protect you." I leaned forward, matching his posture. "Threatening a widow won't protect you either." That earned a small, cold smile. "You think this is a threat?" he asked. "If I wanted to frighten you, Evelyn, you would already know it." The meaning of that landed like a stone dropped into cold water. I didn't look away. "Why are you really here, Mr. Pierce?" He studied me for a long moment before answering. "Because you have something that belongs to me." "The agreement?" "The recordings," he said softly. "The ones David made. The ones that could destroy my reputation. And Lily's." So he knew about the USB drive. "Of course he did." "Return them," he said, "and we can settle this peacefully. And if I don't," his smile vanished, "then you will lose more than your husband ever did." When I left the cafe, the air felt colder, heavier, as if the sky itself had dipped lower. Daniel stayed inside, watching me through the window, his expression unreadable. I forced myself not to hurry. Outside, I stood by my car for a moment, gripping the keys. My hands shook, not from fear, but from clarity. My husband had been frightened of this man. My children were tangled in the aftermath. And Lily. Lily was a wound neither of them had healed. But I wasn't going to be frightened. Not anymore. Daniel Pierce wanted the truth buried. I intended to dig deeper. I drove home from the cafe, with Daniel Pierce's voice still echoing in my ears. There was something in his tone, calm, deliberate, certain, that made me understand exactly why my husband had lived in quiet fear. But fear wasn't what I felt now. Not anymore. By the time I walked into my house, the late afternoon light had cooled into the gray-blue of early dusk. Rebecca was awake on the sofa, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. Her eyes lifted when the door opened, searching my face for answers, or maybe reassurance. I wasn't sure what she needed more. "You're back," she said, her voice small. "Yes." "Did something happen?" "Yes," I repeated. "But we'll talk soon. Where's your brother?" Her grip on the mug tightened. He called me. Twice." I didn't answer. "And did he leave a message?" She hesitated. "Not a message. A threat." I nodded once. "Expected." Then the front door rattled violently. Rebecca jumped, nearly dropping the mug. "Oh, God! Mom!" I put a hand on her arm. "Stay here." Another hard pound. Then Michael's voice, muffled but furious. "Mom, open the door." Right now. I crossed the room with slow, deliberate steps and opened the door. Not all the way, only enough to see him. He stood on the porch, shoulders heaving, face blotched with stress and bitterness. "Why aren't you answering your phone?" he demanded. "I don't owe you that explanation," I said calmly. His eyes narrowed, scanning my face. "Where were you today?" "Away. You think this is a game?" His voice cracked into something high and desperate. "People are talking. Lawyers are getting involved. And you just disappear?" "I didn't disappear," I said. "You simply don't know where to look." His jaw tightened. "I'm trying to save this family." "No," I said quietly. "You're trying to save yourself." Before he could respond, Rebecca appeared behind me in the hallway. Michael's expression twisted. "Oh, so that's what this is? The two of you teaming up against me?" Rebecca flinched. "Michael, stop!" That's not— Shut up, he snapped. You've done enough. I stepped between them. You will not speak to her that way. He looked at me as though he couldn't decide whether to shout at me or collapse. What did Dad leave you? He demanded. What are you hiding? Truth, I said. Something you've been running from, he scoffed. Truth? You wouldn't know the truth if— You forged his signature. The words left my mouth in a low, steady tone. Rebecca froze behind me. Michael blinked once, twice, expression collapsing into something startled and ugly. What? You forged his name years ago on that loan document, I said. Dad recorded everything before he died. I heard it myself. You're lying, he whispered. No, Rebecca said softly. She's not. Michael turned on her with a sharp, dangerous look. You told her? I didn't have to, I said. Your father told me. His face reddened, panic seeping through the cracks in his anger. You don't understand, he said. Dad wasn't thinking clearly at the end. He was confused. He didn't mean— No, I said. He was finally thinking clearly. For the first time in decades. Michael's eyes darted back and forth between us. And then he snapped. This is unbelievable, he shouted. You're taking her side? After everything? I'm taking the side of the truth, Rebecca whispered. No, he spat. You're weak. You always have been. Mom manipulates you, and you let her. Rebecca recoiled like he'd struck her. Something inside me shifted. Not anger. Something colder. Something clear. Michael, I said. Come inside. We are going to talk. He shook his head violently. No, not until you tell me what Pierce wants. Rebecca gasped. My pulse stopped for a beat. Pierce? I repeated quietly. Michael blinked, realizing too late what he'd revealed. I stepped forward. How do you know that name? He swallowed, then tried to cover his panic with bravado. Doesn't matter. It does, I said. It matters a great deal. He backed up a step on the porch, shoulders trembling. He called me, okay? He said Dad owed him. He said you're hiding things that belong to him. Rebecca shook her head slowly. Michael, you talked to him? Without telling us? He threatened me. Michael shouted. What was I supposed to do? He said if I didn't cooperate, our family would be dragged through court, through the media. He manipulated you, I said. Just like he manipulated your father. No, Michael's voice cracked. Dad lied. He lied to all of us. And you're acting like he's some kind of hero. He was a flawed man. I cut in. But he wasn't the monster you're trying to make him. You're shifting the blame because you can't face the truth. What truth? He demanded. That you stole, I said. That you hid it. That you let your father take the fall to protect your image. And now you're terrified the entire world will see you the way he saw you at the end. Michael staggered back as though I had struck him. Rebecca whispered, Mom, maybe don't. No, I said. He came here for honesty. He's getting it. Michael's breathing turned ragged. Sweat gathered at his temples despite the cold. You don't know what you're dealing with, he said. Pierce is dangerous. He told me he's been watching you. He said if I don't help him, he'll— He broke off, throat tight. Fear flickered across his face. Real, raw fear. Rebecca stepped forward, voice trembling. Michael, what did he say? Michael looked at her. Then at me, and for the first time since he arrived, he looked like a child again. Lost. Desperate. He said, Michael whispered, that Dad owed him blood and debt. And if you don't pay it, Mom, he'll make us pay instead. The house fell silent. Outside, a car drove slowly past. Too slowly. But none of us moved. Michael's voice dropped, barely audible. I'm scared, Mom. Rebecca's breath hitched. I stepped toward him. It was the first true thing he'd said in months. And even though I should have felt relief that he could finally admit it, all I felt was the cold certainty of what came next. If Daniel Pierce could scare my son like this, then Pierce was closer, more dangerous, and more desperate than any of us had realized. And I was the only one willing to stand between my family and the fallout. Michael stood on my porch, shaking. The cold wind brushed past him, but the fear in his eyes had nothing to do with the weather. For the first time since his father died, I saw my son without anger blurring the truth of him. Not powerful, not righteous, just terrified. I opened the door wider. Come inside. He hesitated, as if stepping over that threshold meant choosing a side. Then he crossed it, shoulders sagging the moment the door clicked shut behind him. Rebecca hovered near the sofa, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Not defensive, protective. Of herself, of me, maybe of Michael too. It was hard to tell now where her loyalty ended and her dread began. Michael paced, running a trembling hand through his hair. I didn't know what to do. Pierce kept calling. He said Dad owed him everything. Said Dad lied about the business, about the money, about Lily. I exhaled softly. We'll talk about Lily. His eyes darted to mine. You know about her. I know enough. Rebecca sank onto the sofa, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael, why didn't you tell me he contacted you? He laughed, a strangled, humorless sound. Because you always take Mom's side. That's not true, she said. I broke myself protecting you. He blinked at her, startled by the honesty. I stepped forward, grounding my voice. Michael, look at me. He did, though his eyes kept sliding away every few seconds, as if he were afraid to hold my gaze too long. What exactly did Pierce say to you? Michael swallowed hard. He said Dad owed him money, a lot of money, and that Dad promised him leverage. Leverage, I repeated slowly. He didn't explain. Just said Dad left something behind that belonged to him. Something you might have found. The USB drive in my pocket suddenly felt heavier. Michael continued pacing. He said if I helped him get it, everything would be handled quietly. But if I didn't, his voice faltered. Rebecca stood. He can't threaten us like that. Michael's breath hitched. He already has. A long, uneasy silence settled over the living room. The kind that makes ordinary sounds feel too loud. The clock ticking, the radiator humming, the faint rustle of the wind against the porch. Rebecca moved closer to Michael. What did he say exactly? Word for word. Michael's gaze dropped. He said your father promised him protection. That Dad failed, and now someone has to pay the price. Pay with what? I asked. He looked up, eyes shining with the beginnings of tears. He said blood or money. And since Dad is dead, Rebecca gasped. Michael, I panicked, he shouted. He said he knew where we lived. He said he'd been watching us. Watching you, Mom. Rebecca's face strained. Is he the one who sent the picture? Picture? Michael's head snapped toward me. What picture? I didn't answer. Instead, I crossed to my bag and pulled out my phone. But I didn't show him yet. Michael, I said, before I show you what he sent me, I need to know something. He hovered near the entryway, as if he were ready to bolt. What? He whispered. What do you think Pierce wants? He shut his eyes, exhaling shakily. The truth, Mom. Whatever truth Dad left behind. And do you know what that truth is? He shook his head, but the motion was too quick, too forced. A lie he didn't know how to make look convincing anymore. Michael, I said softly, tell me what you know. His shoulders clenched. Dad told me once, just once, that Pierce wasn't safe, that he wasn't someone you crossed. He said if anything ever happened to him, we should keep our distance. Rebecca blinked slowly. Why didn't you tell us? Because I didn't want to admit I believed him, Michael whispered. Dad spent his whole life pretending everything was fine, pretending he was in control. But he was scared, really scared, and that scared me. His voice broke. Rebecca stepped forward, surprising all of us. She reached out and took Michael's hand. He flinched, but didn't pull away. Michael, she said softly, we're here now. You don't have to deal with this alone. He looked down at their hands as if he didn't recognize the gesture or didn't believe he deserved it. But then he squeezed her fingers. A small surrender. A small beginning. I stepped closer. Listen to me, both of you. This ends now. Michael's eyes lifted, wary. How? By telling the truth, I said. All of it. No more secrets. No more lies. No more protecting a man who never protected himself. Rebecca nodded slowly. Michael looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff. Mom, he began, voice thin. But before he could say more, a soft tapping echoed from the front porch. 3 slow knocks. Rebecca stiffened. Mom. It's him, Michael whispered. It has to be. No, I shook my head. Pierce doesn't knock. The 3 knocks came again, patient and precise. I walked to the window and shifted the curtain just enough to see. My breath caught. Lily Pierce stood on my porch. Alone, hands clasped. Expression calm, almost gentle. Behind me, Michael whispered, What does she want? Rebecca's hand found mine. I don't know, I said, but I felt the truth forming like a storm in my chest. I opened the door. Lily's eyes met mine, bright in the fading light. I saw something new there, something that surprised me. Not malice, not confidence. Pain. Mrs. Hart, she said quietly. Please, can we talk? I glanced back at my children, both frightened, both waiting. I turned back to Lily. You have 1 minute, I said. She nodded slowly, the faintest tremble in her breath. I'm not here to threaten you, she whispered. I'm here because my father is lying to all of us. The porch light buzzed above us. Rebecca's breath hitched. Michael stumbled back a step, and Lily Pierce, the woman who'd watched me with such cold distance, looked at me with something dangerously close to desperation. Please, she said, I need your help. Lily stood on my porch with the posture of someone who had run out of places to stand. Her hands trembled just slightly, small tremors she tried to hide by folding her fingers together. The cold wind lifted strands of dark hair across her face, but she didn't brush them away. Please, she repeated, may I come in? Behind me, I felt Michael and Rebecca's breath tighten. Their bodies hovered behind the doorway like shadows unsure of their own shapes. I stepped aside. Lily entered slowly, as if crossing the threshold into another world, one she wasn't sure she had any right to step into. She paused in the hallway, eyes drifting over the framed family photos, the lamp on the console table, the shape of the life my husband had built with me, and the life he had hidden from her. I gestured to the living room. Sit. She obeyed immediately, lowering herself onto the sofa with a caution that made her seem smaller than she had outside. Michael hovered near the far wall. Rebecca stood at the back of the sofa, arms crossed tightly. I remained standing. Lily looked down at her hands. I know you're all afraid of my father. So am I. The honesty in her voice was so quiet, so clean, that even Michael stopped pacing. What does he want from us? Rebecca asked. Lily shook her head. It's what he wants from her. She nodded toward me. He thinks you have something that could expose him. And do I? I asked. Her eyes lifted. Do you? I want to hear why you're here first. Something in her expression cracked. Subtle, but real. She took a shaky breath. I overheard him, she said. On the phone this morning? He told someone you'd been, stirring up old ghosts, that your husband had left things unfinished, that you needed to be handled. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. Handled? Lily nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. He didn't say hurt. But with my father, the line between intimidation and violence is thin. Michael swore under his breath. Lily kept her eyes on me. I didn't know he was contacting your children, but I should have guessed. He always goes after the weak points. Her voice softened. And family is the weakest point of all. Michael bristled, anger snapping back into place. You think we're weak? No, Lily said softly. I think you're human. It was said without condescension, and somehow that disarmed him more than anger ever could. She held her hands together tightly. Mrs. Hart Evelyn. My father lied to me my whole life, about you, about David, about who I was. Her voice trembled on the next words. I grew up believing David had abandoned me. Rebecca inhaled sharply. But he didn't. No, Lily whispered. He didn't. He tried to help, quietly, from a distance. And every time he sent money, my father made sure I believed he was paying penance, not showing kindness. A hollow laugh escaped her. Imagine growing up thinking someone loved you, only to learn he loved your mother, not you. And imagine learning that only by accident. How did you find out? I asked. His illness, she said. He asked to see me once. Just once. And I thought he would explain everything. But when I arrived, her throat tightened. He was already sedated. And my father took that moment to tell me I should stop bothering the man who owed us. Rebecca gasped. That's cruel. That's my father. Lily swallowed hard. And now he thinks you have the recordings. And the financial records. And the agreement that shows he extorted your husband for years. The USB drive in my pocket felt almost hot. You mean the agreement your father signed? I said. Lily's eyes widened. You found it? Michael exhaled sharply. Rebecca looked between us. Yes, I said. Lily closed her eyes as though hearing those words caused both relief and pain. Then he's more desperate than I thought. She looked directly at me now, her composure unraveling thread by thread. Mrs. Hart, if you give him what he wants, he'll destroy it. He'll destroy everything tied to it. And then he'll go after anyone who knows it existed. And if I don't, I asked. Then he'll come for you, she whispered. He'll come for all of us. A long silence followed. One that allowed truth to settle exactly where it belonged, on all of us at once. Michael's voice broke first. Why should we trust you? Lily didn't flinch. You shouldn't. My entire life has been built on a lie your husband never corrected. I'm sorry, Rebecca said softly. Lily nodded once. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for help. Michael scoffed. Help? You want us to help you bring down your own father? No, Lily shook her head. I want to stop him, before he does something he can't take back. She leaned forward. He's not himself anymore. He's unraveling. He's losing control. A subtle tremor passed through her hands again. I thought I could keep him calm. I thought I could keep him away from you. But I was wrong. Her next breath trembled. He believes the truth will destroy him. And he's right. I stepped closer. What do you want from me, Lily? She lifted her eyes. They were raw now. No cold watchfulness, no calculated distance. Just a woman desperate to correct a lifetime of silence. I want you to show me what he's hiding. A beat. And then I want us to face him together. Rebecca let out a shaky breath. Michael rubbed a hand across his face. I studied Lily. Her fear was real. Her shame was real. Her desperation was real. And yet, there was something else too. Something deeper. A quiet, growing resolve. She wasn't here only to escape her father. She was here because she was finally ready to confront him. I nodded slowly. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, you come back here. She stood. You'll help? I'll hear the truth, I said. And I'll decide what justice looks like. Lily nodded and walked toward the door, her steps unsteady but determined. Before she stepped outside, she paused. He won't stop calling you, she said. But don't answer. Not until you understand everything. I nodded. And as she walked down the path, she murmured without looking back. He doesn't know your strength yet. That's why he thinks he can win. The porch light flickered once as her figure disappeared into the night. Michael exhaled shakily. Rebecca leaned against the doorway, drained. And I, standing in the center of my quiet living room, felt something shift inside me once more. Not fear, not anger. Purpose. Tomorrow, I would hear the truth. And tomorrow, the Pierce family's secrets would start to unravel. Lily arrived at 9 on the dot. I watched her from the front window as she stood on the walkway, shoulders squared, coat wrapped tight against the morning chill. She didn't look like someone blown in by crisis. She looked like someone who had finally decided which way to stand when the wind changed. I opened the door before she could knock. Come in, I said. She stepped inside, eyes flicking briefly to the framed photos in the hallway, then to the closed door of the study. The house felt different today, less like a place that secrets were hiding in, and more like a place they were about to leave. Rebecca waited at the edge of the living room, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. Michael hovered near the doorway, arms folded, not quite able to commit to either retreat or engagement. Lily nodded to each of them. Thank you for letting me come back, she said. You're not here as a guest, I replied. You're here as someone who has as much to lose as we do. A faint, humorless smile touched her mouth. That's fair. I motioned toward the dining table. On it sat the envelope from the bank, the photocopied agreement, and the small silver USB drive. Lily's eyes landed on the drive. You listened to all of it? Not yet, I said. There's more. Her brows knit. More? The first file was your story from his side, I said. I suspect the second one is your father's. Michael shifted uneasily. Why would Dad record anything about Pierce? Because fear makes people talk to whatever will listen, I said. Even a machine, Lily swallowed. You haven't played it. No, I said. You should be here for that. I slid the USB drive into my laptop. The screen blinked awake, the drive icon appearing like a small, unassuming door. 2 audio files. We had heard the first. I clicked the second. For a moment there was only static. Then my husband's voice, softer this time, threaded with something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite resignation. Evelyn, he began, this one is harder. Lily's head bowed. If you're listening to this, he said, then I'm trusting you with more than I ever trusted myself with. Daniel won't stop. Not with money. Not with guilt. He'll use Lily until she doesn't recognize her own life. His breath rasped. He used our partnership to launder money. I signed papers I shouldn't have signed. When the authorities came close once, he made sure my name was the one on the line, not his. My fingers tightened on the table. I paid to avoid charges, he continued. I told myself I was protecting you. But really, I was protecting my pride. Daniel knew that. He always knew where my weak spots were. A rustle. Papers. The agreement in the box. The delayed transfer. That's his leverage. It makes it look like I agreed to take on his criminal debt. If he ever releases it without context, it will drag our name through the mud. Lily's jaw clenched. But there's something he doesn't know, my husband said. Years ago, he signed a second set of documents. This time in his name. Not mine. I kept copies. If exposed, they prove he orchestrated the laundering and used me as the front. Michael's eyes widened. What? I didn't have the courage to use them when I should have, my husband whispered. But you can. If he threatens you, you go to Harrington. You go to the authorities. And you give them everything, even if it ruins my memory. He paused as if bracing for something. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I'm sorry, Lily. I'm sorry I didn't stop him when I still could. But you don't owe him your silence. Neither of you do. The recording clicked off. No goodbye. Just the open space where choice begins. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lily lifted her head. My father won't stop, she said quietly. You are right. Rebecca's eyes shone. Those other documents. Do you know where they are? I nodded. If he kept them anywhere, they're either with Harrington or hidden where Pierce was certain we wouldn't look. The house? Michael asked. No, I met Lily's gaze. With the person he trusted to hear the worst about himself. Lily frowned. Who? Harrington, I said. Or someone he instructed Harrington to contact if things went bad. Michael swore under his breath. So what now? We just... Call Pierce up and tell him we've got his leash? Lily shook her head. That will only provoke him. Then we choose the ground, I said. And the witness. Harrington's office felt different the second time I entered it. The last time, I'd come as a grieving widow, trying to make sense of papers and promises. Today I walked in knowing exactly what I was there to do. Harrington looked up from his desk as we entered. Me, Lily beside me, Michael and Rebecca slightly behind, like a fractured line learning to stand together. He blinked. Oh, all of you. Yes, I said. All of us. Lily closed the door. Evelyn, Harrington said carefully, is everything. You have more documents, I said, relating to Daniel Pierce. My husband mentioned them in his recording. Where are they? He paled slightly. You listened to... Yes. He hesitated for a heartbeat too long. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a thin, sealed folder. Your husband asked me to hold this, he said. He instructed me to release it only if you insisted or if certain pressures were applied to the estate. Lily let out a shaky breath. That would be now. Before Harrington could respond, the office door opened. No knock, just the assertive turn of a knob used to obedience. Daniel Pierce stepped inside. My heart tightened, but my back stayed straight. He looked at the room in a single sweep. Me, my children, Lily, Harrington, the folder on the desk. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, he said lightly. A full house. Harrington stood. Mr. Pierce, You can't just— Yes, I said calmly. He can. He thinks he owns whatever room he enters. Daniel's gaze settled on me. We had an agreement, Mrs. Hart. I told you I'd give you time to think. I've thought, I replied. And I've listened. He followed my glance to the USB drive on the desk, to the folder beneath Harrington's hand, to Lily, whose chin was lifted in a way I had never seen before. Lily, he said, tone shifting, what are you doing here? Listening, she said. For once, something dangerous flashed in his eyes. He turned back to me. You should be careful what you listen to, Evelyn. Your husband didn't tell the truth about everything. No, I said. He didn't. But he told enough. I nodded to Harrington. He set the folder on top of the desk and opened it. Copies. Signatures. Transactions. All with one name repeated where my husband's had once been. Daniel Pierce. Daniel's confident expression faltered for the first time. What is this? He asked, though he already knew. Your handwriting, I said. Your agreements. Your laundering trail. The one you insisted my husband carry on his back. You can't prove that, he snapped. That's what the authorities are for, I said calmly. Silence. Lily took a step forward. Dad. The word came out strained. Heavy. He didn't look at her. You used me, she said. My whole life. You used his guilt, their silence. He finally turned. I protected you. No, she whispered. You hid behind me. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. I know now, she said. David wasn't my father. You lied about that because it was useful, because it gave you leverage. Over him, over me, over them. She nodded toward me and my children. Michael's jaw worked. Rebecca stared at the floor, tears spilling silently. Daniel's mouth tightened. You ungrateful. Don't, I said. He looked at me with something like hatred. Do you know what will happen if you go through with this? You'll drag your husband's name through the mud along with mine. He already dragged his name, I said, by staying quiet. I'm here to clean it, he scoffed. You think anyone will care about the nuances? About who started what? They'll remember the scandal, the mess, the headlines. Maybe, I said, but I'll remember something else, he sneered. What's that? That I didn't choose fear, I said softly. For once in my life. The room went very still. I'm not afraid of your threats, I continued. I'm not afraid of the truth. And I'm not afraid of what happens to your reputation when it finally meets reality. Harrington cleared his throat. Mr. Pierce, I've contacted a colleague at the district attorney's office. Informally. Off the record, for now. Daniel's eyes widened. You what? I suspect they'll be interested, Harrington said, in what your former partner kept. Daniel crossed the space between us in 2 quick strides, leaning over the desk, fury radiating off him. You're making a mistake, he hissed. I didn't move. No, I said. I'm ending one. Behind him, Lily spoke again, voice steady. I won't testify for you, she said. Not this time. Whatever comes, I'll tell the truth. He turned to her, stunned. You'd do that to me? He asked. She met his gaze without flinching. You did it to yourself, she replied. For a moment, Daniel looked like a man who'd been pushed somewhere he never believed he'd have to stand, on ground not of his choosing, surrounded not by power, but by the people he'd used to get it. His voice dropped, low and venomous. This isn't over. You're right, I said. It's just finally starting where it should have years ago. I turned to Harrington. Make the call, I said. He nodded, reaching for the phone. Daniel stared at me, at Lily, at my children. His gaze lingered on Michael, on the fear he'd planted there, the leverage he was losing. Then he straightened his coat, every inch of him still pretending he had not already begun to fall. He walked out without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. In the quiet that followed, I realized something. For the first time in a very long time, the most dangerous person in the room wasn't the man with the power. It was the truth. And it was on our side now. The house felt different when we returned that afternoon. Lighter, somehow. Or maybe that was just me. Secrets have weight, and once they're gone, the air shifts. Rebecca went straight to the kitchen and began making tea, not because she wanted any, but because her hands needed something to do. Michael lingered near the living room doorway, uncertain, guilt pooling around him like something he couldn't step out of. Lily sat on the edge of the sofa, quiet. She hadn't said a word since we left Harrington's office. She didn't need to. Her voice had already changed the course of things. I stood near the window, watching the late sunlight drift across the lawn. My reflection stared back at me. Older, yes, but clearer. Steadier. A woman who had finally stopped carrying what wasn't hers. Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, what's going to happen now?" I turned to him. His voice didn't have that sharp edge anymore. It didn't cut. It trembled. "Harrington will handle the legal side," I said. "Your father left everything needed to expose Pierce, and Lily's testimony will matter." Lily nodded once, eyes softening but not wavering. "But us," Michael said. "What happens to us?" His question wasn't about courts or investigations. It was about family. The kind of family that had been stretched thin, bent out of shape, pulled by lies none of us created, and yet all of us suffered from. "Tell me something," I said. "Are you done lying?" Michael swallowed. "Yes." "Are you ready to face whatever comes?" He nodded, and for the first time since he was a little boy, he looked like someone asking for permission to be forgiven, not demanding it. Rebecca joined us, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. He didn't pull away. "You are scared," she said softly. "And ashamed. Fear makes people do foolish things, Michael, but it doesn't have to define you." Michael nodded, jaw tight with emotion. I stepped closer. "Your father made mistakes. You made yours. I made mine too, by letting silence be more comfortable than confrontation." I reached out and touched his cheek gently. "We move forward from here, not back." His composure wavered, just a fraction, but enough. "Mom," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm sorry." "I know," I said. And I did. Rebecca's breath hitched, and she moved beside him. He let her. Behind us, Lily stood slowly. "I should go," she said softly. "My father, he'll realize soon I wasn't on his side." "You don't have to be afraid of him anymore," Michael said. She gave a faint smile. "I'll always be afraid of him, but now I won't obey him." I stepped toward her. "Lily." She stopped near the doorway, looking at me with those steady, searching eyes. "You aren't responsible for the choices your father made," I said. "But you're responsible for what you do next." She nodded. "I know, and I want to do the right thing, even if it costs me everything I thought I knew." There was a quiet strength in her now, the kind that comes from stepping out of someone else's shadow. "Lily," I said softly, "you can visit here if you need a safe place." Her eyes glistened, not with sorrow, but with something resembling relief. "Thank you," she whispered. She stepped out into the fading light, paused once as though imprinting the moment, and then walked down the path without looking back. Michael watched her go. "Do you trust her?" "Yes," I said, "because she finally trusts herself." Rebecca touched my shoulder. "Mom, you did it. You really did it." I shook my head gently. No, the truth did. That evening, after the house grew quiet and my children drifted home, Michael subdued but present, Rebecca lighter than she had been in weeks, I returned to the study. I hadn't entered this room since the night the planner disappeared. Now I did. The light from the desk lamp cast a warm circle across the wood. The drawer where the photograph had been left was still slightly ajar, as if waiting for closure. I sat down and took out the photo again, the one of my husband young, smiling, bound to a life he never fully told me about. I traced the edge with my thumb. "You should have trusted me," I whispered. Not with anger, not even with sorrow, just truth. And I suppose that was the difference now. I stood, gathered the important papers, the planner pages, the photocopied agreement, the lawyer's notes, and placed them into a single folder. Harrington would need them tomorrow. Then I closed the drawer softly. Before turning off the lamp, I paused. I thought of the flash forward, the moment that started everything. Michael's accusation, his voice sharp with fear and entitlement. "You forged Dad's will, Mom." He hadn't known then he was speaking his own guilt into the air, mistaking his reflection for mine. Now, after everything, I finally understood something about that moment. I had been standing in the wrong story. The truth had always been waiting for me to step into the right one. I walked to the porch and stood alone in the quiet dusk. No cars idled across the street. No watchers lingered. No shadows clung to the corners of the yard. Just a calm stillness, the kind that arrives only after a long storm finally decides to leave. Looking back now, I see it clearly. Truth doesn't save you from pain. It saves you from carrying someone else's. And maybe that is what real forgiveness looks like. Not forgetting what was done, but refusing to hold it any longer. I closed the door gently, letting the peace settle behind me. Tomorrow, justice would begin its slow, patient work. Tonight, I allowed myself something smaller, something softer. Rest. I didn't know it then, but the truth had been walking toward me for years, patient and unyielding, and when it finally arrived, it didn't shatter me the way I feared. It set me free. If you've ever uncovered something that changed the shape of your life, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if you want to follow what happens next, how justice unfolds, how families rebuild, make sure to like the video and subscribe. There are still pieces to gather, and I'm learning that healing has its own kind of mystery. Thank you for listening. We'll talk soon.